Okay, hi everyone. Just quick sound check. Can everybody hear and see me? Maybe just write something in the chat or send a thumbs up. We will begin in just a few minutes and just wait for a little moment to see if some more people will join. Everybody understand me well, see me well? Everybody understand me well, see me well? Okay, I will begin then. Welcome everyone. I'm glad to be here, and it's good to see that some people are interested in our today's webinar. Thank you to AgroCat for inviting me and for giving me your time on this evening. My name is Jonas. I'm going to be your host today, and to be honest, I don't exactly know who all of you are, but I have been told most of you are from India and either interested in farming or you are already a farmer. So for this first webinar with us, I will keep it relatively broad and not go too deep into any detail. I will be teaching about soil health and organic farming. So make sure you have something to write down, to take some notes. So in the end, when we do some questions, you know what to ask. Before we get into the presentation, I want to quickly tell you a bit about myself so you understand who is talking to you this evening. I always loved good food and cooking. I also learned early in my life about the importance of balanced nutrition to lead a healthy and energetic life. To feel home in my own body, I had to move around a lot, I had to rest well, and I had to eat even better. At some point, though, I had to know where my food was coming from, and what I learned about it was quite alarming. I studied agriculture in Berlin. This is the picture you can see here from my faculty. But the faculty itself and the curriculum were quite rusty and dusted in the conventional and conservative practices, essentially from the last century. But we are living in the 21st century now, and I quickly realized that this wasn't the way to go anymore. So I started to focus more on finding my own roots, so to speak, learning about ancestry and the indigenous ways of living in harmony with nature and the earth, and take that wisdom into a world of accelerating progress and technology. I traveled a lot and I saw the reality and the damage that has been done to our world. I saw the implications of wealth accumulation, especially in the West, without any limits or concern for the existence of millions and for also our natural heritage. In recent years, the fragility and inflicted damage of commercial industrial farming methods became even more evident. I'm talking about the loss of biodiversity and huge natural reserves to deforestation, to monocultures, and to chemical pollutions as well. I'm also talking about the erosion and degradation of land, of huge land masses, advancing climate change that adds to it, habitat loss for wildlife and humans as well, and also, of course, ever increasing weather events that make everything else harder. So, is if these developments were not threatening enough on itself, the impact on our health and our livelihood are further exposed to a widening gap in the wealth distribution and access to basic goods, to education, to healthcare, housing, or transport. All of this is, of course, subject to our political and economic systems, to the way we make sure to enforce international and national laws, to how we enforce human rights, and if we at all actively fight against corruption and also misinformation, disinformation. I'm sorry. So you might be wondering what all of this has to do with the way you grow your food on your farms. Um, I will go into that in a second. Um, but in my approach that I take, all of this links directly to our individual and communal health and resilience. To understand this connection, I believe we have to talk about the economic structure and motive of the agricultural sector and our own origin and dependence from intact ecosystems. Therefore, this will not only be an introduction to the possibility of farming organically, but a lesson about the necessary steps we have to take to protect and build communities that can foster the next generations in a sustainable way. So, once again, thank you for giving me your attention, and I hope you will learn something new. I will just take a second and look at the chat to see. It seems like you can hear me well. That is good to know. If you have questions, just stick around for the end, I would suggest for now, so that we get through it. And whatever comes up and what you want to know, you can then ask me in the end of the presentation. For this first lecture, we will start with an introduction to soil health and its relevance. This will lead us into organic farming and the benefits, as well as some steps how to get into it. I will share also a more holistic approach to farming and securing our future, and then end this presentation with a little outlook on building these resilient and independent communities that we so urgently need. After that, you will then have time to ask questions or any advice that you might need in your personal situation. Okay, I know that was kind of an intense start to it, but I feel like this is something important to cover so we all know from which perspective we are coming from and why we are interested in this in the first place, why it really matters. To go at it a bit more slowly now, we will start by understanding what soil even is and why it is the fundamental layer to anything actually we want to achieve. I could tell you how soil is a natural resource composed of minerals and organic matter, of water and air, and that it serves as a medium for plants to grow in. But while it is important to understand the chemical composition of soil and how it forms, which I will cover in a minute, I want to quickly take a little step backwards. I learned myself to understand soil as kind of the literal meaning of Mother Earth. It is where seeds sprout to become plants that nurtured life, right? And the evolution that came to it for millions of years until at some point we came up with our own existence as humanity. It then brought us the intelligence over time to manipulate it in ways that made life exponentially easier for us. Because if we are well fed and if we are healthy without using all our energy that we have in one day to just survive and feed ourselves, we then can go on to share tasks in our community, and that will allow for rapid progress in our way of living. This is how we came into the modern age. So I believe that it is actually no understatement that a rich and a productive soil equals a rich and a productive society, if some certain other criteria are met as well, of course. That means that while there is different types of soil with unique characteristics regarding water retention and nutrient availability, it can always be viewed almost like something like a currency that allows to pay for the level of order that you find above the soil. So the properties of healthy soil are that it has a good structure, it is not really compact, it is nutrient rich, it is well trained, and it is full of organic life and microorganisms. This will support plant growth and a diversity of species that therefore enable more and also larger animals like ourselves to develop and flourish on top of the soil. So it should be clear by now, and I'm sure you know that healthy soil enhances plant growth. It will lead to higher yields and better quality of your crops overall, while a poor soil can really limit productivity and crop health. In order to figure out the quality of your soil that you have around your farm or wherever you are, and also how to improve it, you can use a few simple tests. One is the jar test. You may have heard of that, to assess the soil composition. For that, you will just fill a jar with soil and water. You shake it and let it settle. And then you can identify the sand and silt and clay layers, how much of that is in there. The same way to do that, or I mean, another way which shows you the same result, is just taking a bit of soil into your hands and you add a little bit of water, and then you just try and form a roll, and feeling if it's more gritty, if it's more like, feel it's more like sugar, or feeling if it's more smooth like flour, or maybe something in between, will also tell you about the composition of the soil. Mm. Two more tests is one, the infiltration test, that you can take by measuring how quickly water soaks into the soil. This will help you find out about its drainage capabilities, which is important for your choice of crops and also for adapting your land to floodings or drought. Lastly, for the things that you can do actually right now if you wanted to, you can do is what you can do is account for earthworms and kind of check the biological activity that you find in the soil on your land. Again, an unhealthy soil is compacted. It is low in nutrients and it lacks biological life. You, I feel like you can always kind of see that by just looking at it. It is way more hard and cracked, and you know there's no worms that will be able to get through that soil. Healthy soil, in comparison, is rich in organic matter and it has many worms. It has a crumbly texture and it supports diverse biological life. I'm sure you know that as well when you have that earth that kind of falls through your hands, that has this moist smell, that's really dark, and where you will find lots of worms and other insects inside. If you want to find out more about the chemical composition, the pH of your soil, or if it is polluted with any kind of heavy metals, you can also conduct a test in a lab. If you go on YouTube, for example, right here, or anywhere else in the internet, you will find a lot of resources. Just look up jar test or ribbon test, or any kind of test to check your soil really, and you will find lots of instructions how to exactly do that, and also how to figure out what the results mean and what you should do to develop the soil in a direction that you want it to go. So next up, Or what I want to say to that as well is that it will need take time. You will have to be patient and reflective about your individual surroundings and the conditions to implement strategies that you can sustain and adapt over a longer period of time, that are suited to your own resources and capabilities. But many people would be surprised if they just kind of gave nature a chance to assist them in a way and find kind of its natural flow instead of trying to interrupt and control everything that is going on in the ground. Just by respecting these few key principles and like just not taking more than you give back to it or not claiming it all for your own benefit will take you a long way and make everything that comes afterwards easier, really. So there's a few natural ways to improve soil fertility. As you probably know, a very essential one is compost. There are countless techniques around compost, like hot or cold compost. There's compost teas, there's vermicompost, bokashi compost. But either way, composting organic waste always enriches the soil with nutrients and also improves its structure, so it can hold more water, more air. Um, for that, you will use local materials like cow dung or other animal droppings. You can use residues from agriculture like leaves or grass or even wood. And you can also use just like your regular kitchen waste or anything that's organic, actually. One way or another, you want to keep a closed loop of what you take from your land to go back into the land and not bring too much stuff in that doesn't belong there, like chemicals. Eliminate or minimize the use of chemical pesticides or fertilizers to really reduce the environmental impact, especially on the microorganisms in your soil. And these are your friends. You need these microorganisms. They have a lot of benefits, especially for the roots of your plants in providing nutrients, breaking down matter. And if you don't have them, you will face a lot of problems. Many are scared actually when they hear that, since it's the way they know it, and without, they fear a collapse in produce and efficiency, and they also don't know how to handle their pests. I believe it is once again crucial to understand that this is a process. It will not change overnight. You have to give your land time to recover after years or even decades of depletion and just taking and trying to sustain it in unnatural ways by just pumping chemicals into it. You need to really give it time to recover. Like you yourself need some time to recover when you have been sick, or if there was a longer period of hardship and a lot of work, and you really need some time to recover. That's the same for the land and for nature. Um, Two more really important measures that you can take is crop rotation and cover crops, as well as mulching. Rotating these crops prevents nutrient depletion from the ground. Through the rotation, it also reduces the pest and disease cycles as well. You will allow nitrogen fixing plants to go into these cycles. There's nitrogen fixing trees. There's a variety of plants that you can use for that to really enrich that soil again in between, so the next crop that follows benefits from this rotation. You will probably know more about this than me. I've only heard about it, but I feel like every country has these traditional practices, like in India as well, where I believe you rotate cereals with legumes like soybeans or peas with rice or wheat. Um, I believe this is quite common in northern India, but again, you probably know more about that than me. The same thing, though, can be done with cover crops like mustard or clover, which prevent erosion and add organic material to the ground. I mean, just imagine there's a flat ground, just the earth, there's heavy rain, and will flood everything away that is on there. But if there's strong cover crop on it that with its roots sticks together the soil, it also gives protection to your actual plant that you want to grow in between. This will help a lot, just like mulching in an essence. Um, just with these practices in mind, and like I said, literal infinite resources on the internet to help you develop an individual strategy, you should be able to make an assessment of your land, of your individual situation, and identify the most critical areas for improvement. All right, then, organic farming and its benefits. We've dug quite deep into soil health, so let's talk about it. This term is thrown around a lot, but what does it really mean then? It's not just the marketing trend or some gimmick around it. It is actually a way of farming that works with nature instead of working against it. It is about growing food without the synthetic chemicals or also genetically modified organisms, which kind of is a whole topic for itself. We might need these genetically modified organisms to combat climate change and also its consequences. But yeah, maybe we will do that in another webinar. Instead, what we do in organic farming is we use natural processes and inputs to nurture our crops and our livestock. These two things go together, and I will get to it a little bit later. Just think of going back to our roots, to the way our ancestors, your ancestors, farmed for thousands of years before the chemical revolution, and it also worked in some way. But still, you don't need to mistake this for being primitive or less effective. It is about combining this very age-old wisdom from centuries with a modern and scientific understanding, also combining it with technology that becomes even more interesting right now, where you have all kinds of systems and sensors, or even robotics and automation that can take place, and also with AI and neural networks that can process these informations and really help you find an adapted strategy for your land that suits best, yeah, just to your conditions. Um, there is, however, a few key principles. Um, like well, where I started with that, it all starts with the soil. It is the foundation, but I also mentioned biodiversity. The more diverse our farms are, the more resilient they are. And when it comes to pests that I mentioned earlier, we also don't just go for the easy way and create some cocktail of chemicals. There's natural methods working with nature's own pest control systems, so to speak. I will give a few examples later. So, why should you at all care about organic farming? Since you are here today, I imagine you care about your health and the health of your family. When you eat organic, you're reducing your exposure to potentially harmful chemicals. Some studies also suggest that organic produce might even be more nutritious And many people also that I have met say that it's more tasty too. Whenever I was on any farm or homestead in the last years, and I could just go into the garden, pick some salad, some tomatoes, or whatever I wanted to prepare a nice and quick meal, I always thought it definitely tasted a lot better. I have also this kind of rule of thumb that the shorter the way from the farm to your plate, the less processes that are involved in between, the better it just overall feels to eat that food. Um, anyway, it's not just about us humans, or at least not directly. Organic farming is kinder to all our environment. It reduces pollution in our soil and in our water. It also conserves it better. It creates healthier ecosystems where a variety of plants and animals can really thrive. Um, the important thing here again is just to think long term, and the way we're farming conventionally, we are depleting our soils. That has happened over a long time. Just doing 1 year of conventional farming, this will be fine. Nature will recover from that. But if you do it for decades and decades, and you give it no pause, no break, then it is really difficult to for nature to recover from that, and it will pollute our water, and it also contributes immensely to climate change. It, in a way, is like we're borrowing all these resources from future generations, but we will not have any way to pay them back. They will pay the consequences. Organic farming, on the other hand, it builds up soil health over time. It is a system that can sustain us not just for years, but for generations and generations. Um, what is important about it is money. I know that many people always wonder about that, about um, economy of organic farming, and they ask, can organic farming be economically viable? In short, the answer is yes, it absolutely can. It can be a real boost to local economies. It often requires more labor, which means more jobs, especially in rural areas. It supports small businesses that provide organic inputs, such as organic fertilizers, or that process organic products. It can overall increase the food security by diversifying what we grow. You know, like how there's sometimes huge areas and with only monocultures and they're only growing the same thing. There only has to be one pest, one thing that goes out of control, and the whole produce will be lost for the season. If you diversify it and there's a whole lot of different genetics and species in that system that also benefit each other, you might lose one or two or I don't know, a few of them, but there will be so many others that you will keep because they are not affected by the same pests. Um, Back to the economy. I don't know. You will again know more about this than myself, but I have looked at Sikkim in the past. I don't know if I pronounce it right. Um, but this Indian state, it went fully organic a few years ago, or maybe more. That doesn't mean that everything is perfect, and of course, they are facing their own challenges, but it shows a step in the right direction for sure. They have seen a real boom in ecotourism. Their farmers are getting better price for their produce, and they are even starting to export organic produce to other countries. Here in Germany, where I am, and also in many Western countries, the demand for organic produce is really big and it's growing. It's growing fast. More and more people are willing to pay more for organic food, as also the education around it increases. This presents a real opportunity for farmers who are willing to make that switch. Only question left is, how do you start then? I hate to break it to you again. Transitioning to organic isn't something that you do overnight. It is a journey. You start by gradually replacing these synthetic inputs with natural alternatives. You might begin with maybe just one field or just one bed, even, or maybe just one crop, and then you can expand from there once you kind of feel safer. It takes time, like I said earlier, for your soil to recover. It also takes time for these natural pest control systems to establish themselves. In the beginning, you might be wondering, what is he even talking about? What's that supposed to be, a natural pest control system? Give me a little bit of time, I will talk more into it, but if the whole ecosystem is not there anymore, there's just one crop and one pest for that crop, there isn't really anything you can work with. So that's just why it takes time. Um, and also just remember that nature is really resilient. If it is given a chance, it will bounce back. One more matter in India, like in many countries, is the matter of certification. I believe you have the National Program for Organic Production, the NPOP, that sets the standards for organic farming. Getting certified can open up new markets for you, especially if you're looking to export to other countries. But even without certification, or thinking that is too much struggle to get, um, this doesn't mean you can't do it. There's usually always local consumers that are very happy to buy from farmers they trust. And this trust, that they use organic methods, can be just as valuable as any official certification. So in the beginning, maybe don't worry too much about it. But building this trust with your customers can also, of course, take a little bit of time. In the end, what I really want to say here is that organic farming is more than just avoiding chemicals. Okay, it is a holistic approach to agriculture that considers the health of the soil, of the whole ecosystem, the farmer himself, and the consumer. It's about working with these cycles of nature I mentioned and these rhythms and not trying to dominate them. And as we face these challenges like climate change and food security, organic farming offers this path forward through these crises. It's definitely not always the easiest path, but I do believe that it is the more sustainable one and that it's what it's about, right? I just encourage you here to consider it not only as a set of practices and replacing one thing with another, but as a kind of philosophy that you can also put on yourself. I will talk a little bit about permaculture, which can also be considered as kind of a philosophy that you can expand not only for your work that you're doing on the field, but on your whole life. It's just part of seeing it as kind of a bigger ecosystem, and you yourself are the steward that leads the direction. You might have heard of that, of this steward of the landship. So I mentioned this holistic approach to farming, where we will just take it a little step further, and it is also which I am going for myself. Holistic does sound like a fancy term. It is a bit overused, and that's okay. It's really about seeing your farm as this one interconnected system and even beyond. You could even bring it to the scale of the whole planet. That's a bit exaggerated, but if you will, and think about weather patterns like the monsoon or El Nino, the Gulf Stream, or also animal migrations, these happen on all layers, from this microscopic lens in the ground in your soil, from microorganisms and mycelium, to whole forests that are connected with each other, so much more stronger than one single tree that stands somewhere in the fields, or whales that literally swim around the whole globe, in order to feed their and bring up their young. Um, so all that I said earlier about soil health, you can bring to holistic farming. You can bring it to your whole farm, because it takes that idea and expands it beyond just one field. So for some examples, which also could be a whole presentation in itself, and I would really like to talk more about that, but with the time schedule, I can only go cover it slightly. Um, I don't know if any of you tried integrating crops and livestock with each other. That's kind of the direction, because it is very fascinating how these two work together. Your animals, they provide natural fertilizer for your crops, and in turn, your crops feed the animals. It's nature's own recycling system, and they are everywhere. Literally, we just have to recognize them and learn about them. Now, like I said before, I'm not an expert in Indian farming practices, but I did read about some amazing traditional systems really that you guys have. This like this wadi model, or also silvopasture. These are really great examples of agroforestry. They show how integrating trees and animals into your farm can provide a multitude of benefits. During my own travels and also on my land, I learned that the more diverse your farm, the more resilient it becomes. I said that earlier. It's like creating mini ecosystems. Different plants attract different insects. The more you have, the more will come. And every plant, every insect, every animal plays its own role. And if it is introduced to the whole system, they will complement each other. Some of them will not, and it's good to know about them, what you plant next to what other plant. But it can create these really smooth, um, how do you say, like patterns really, in which they help fertilize, they help pollinate, and they eat pests, which then will bring birds in that will eat these insects. They will also carry seeds around. Um, if you haven't heard or didn't learn much about permaculture and agroforestry, I definitely strongly encourage you to look more into that. It once again takes some time for the trees to grow, for these species to really establish themselves. You once again need to let nature work for you. But it is pretty amazing if that how these things work essentially. What I do understand is that making a living is crucial. Um, Besides what we talked about earlier, there's some more things that are worthy to look into. It's concepts like community supported agriculture, the CSAs. I've read about some successful CSAs, I believe in cities like Bengaluru and Pune, if I pronounce that right. It's a model where consumers buy directly from farmers, sharing both the risks and the rewards. It provides a stable income for farmers and fresh local produce for the consumers. That is a win-win. Here in Germany, when you become part of these initiatives as a consumer, you even help working on the farm sometimes, or you deliver the produce like once a week or once a month or however often you want. I believe it is a great chance, especially for children, to start reconnecting more again with the land, with themselves, nature, and also their spirit. Um, yeah, I really mean the way we developed to and learned to just consume, often without any effort anymore. It should be self-explanatory that instead of just taking a pre-manufactured product from our freezer, um, being out there on the land is a really important step to reconnect with our human essence, our origin in the wild, and I believe it is essential to solve a lot of these really big problems that we face globally. Um, but sure, it is not as always easy as that. You do need the home to return to after your work, or all of this becomes quite um, impactful. So, holistic farming is not just about individual farms. It is about creating these sustainable local economies. When we farm in this way, more money circulates within the community. Jobs are created, and even young people might see a future in agriculture, like myself. I could never imagine it in the traditional way, which here in my home country, um, it, it drives farmers mad, it drives them into ruin. It is a lot of political choices, and I had no interest whatsoever to learn this framework anymore in university. I'm not saying that it's easy in to transition to this holistic approach. It does take this time and patience and also a certain willingness to experiment, and it can be hard when you're struggling anyway. Many people here, they don't see this way because they are already really on the low limit of things. They don't know how to pay their bills anymore or anything like that. So when you tell them to take this fully new approach, which isn't really new in the first place, um, and to not use these chemical or synthetic fertilizers anymore, they think you're mad because they really don't know how it's supposed to work, and they don't realize that it's a completely different framework from the beginning. Um, what I've learned and what I totally stand behind is that it is really about these long-term benefits for your soil, your crops, and the genetics of your crops, your community, and if you want just your own health, should be enough to motivate that. Because that is our greatest resource, really, that we have. If we're not healthy, we're not gonna farm at all for long. Um, yeah, just think about it in this holistic approach. It's not just about what's happening on your fields and how you're going to sell that produce, but really around about all these people around you that live in your area, about the way light and water and air comes on the land, and whether which isn't natural for us as humans, but with a wider perspective into the future, not only thinking long term, because it will take some time, like I said a couple of times now. Um, every step is worthy. It is a step towards this healthier future for all of us. You can just go slowly in the beginning, and I'm for sure interested to hear your thoughts on this when I finished. If any of you have tried these things already, what's been your experience like? I hope that some of you might want to share a little bit of your experience. But before we do that, let's quickly close the loop to the beginning. We started by discussing soil and the importance to understand that Healthy soil isn't just beneficial for your crops, but a key factor in finding a path into a just and encouraging future for all of us and also adapting to climate change. When your soil is healthy, it functions like a sponge. It absorbs excess water and retains it during dry seasons. Um, and this trait is crucial when we face more of these extreme weather events. Um, in India, you have valuable traditional practices that support this, like rainwater harvesting, for instance. It is an excellent method for water management and building resilience. Water is life. Stay hydrated. Um, we want to consider our farms as part of a larger system. Each of our plots of land is connected, they form a network, and this is also where the power of these farmer networks becomes evident. These FPOs, farmer producer organizations that I talked earlier, they are doing significant work in this area. They provide platforms for farmers to share knowledge, support each other, and gain more market influence. They, if you're not part of one yet, you should take a look into it, just like into these community-supported agricultural programs or initiatives, because just imagine having a direct connection with the people consuming your produce, and not just an economic connection, but the whole idea of taking it to a level where you really want to help each other and just um, not just buy from each other. But this is also going into a bit of a different direction. Um, I do believe it goes a little bit beyond just selling produce, that it is about building relationships and creating a food system that benefits everyone. I myself, I like thinking into this future. I know it is kind of coming out of a situation of privilege, um, but nonetheless, I believe it is really important to talk about why people, for example, you might take that as a bit crazy, but have to pay for food in the first place. I feel like just like clean water or energy or education and housing, these are all things that should be provided in a perfect world. We don't live in a perfect world, but why not at least talk about it, take this approach, and see what are the first steps that we can take? And this is kind of like where I'm coming from when I talk about this to you. Um, Health, like I said, is the most valuable thing we got. It is for me also a key element, and which drove me to go into that direction, to keep learning about it, try and find communities and people that are also interested in this, and understand ourselves not just as farmers. We understand that we are caretakers of the land, that we are also health providers and the builders of resilient communities. This whole perspective isn't new. Um, I think our ancestors really understood this interconnectedness better than we do today. But yeah, we're slowly rediscovering it. Let's make a quick conclusion and recap. We began with the soil health, the foundation of everything that we do. We explored organic farming, working with nature instead of working against it. We looked at holistic approaches, seeing our farm as complete ecosystems. And finally, we also connected this to our wider communities, and the challenges we face as a collective, not only as individuals, but maybe even as a species. I understand this might seem overwhelming, not exactly what you expected. You might be wondering where to start. The good news is, by being here today and engaging with these ideas, you have already taken the first step. Your next steps will depend on where you are in your journey. I do have a few suggestions for you. Let's just start small. Um, like I said earlier, just try it on a portion of your land or maybe in your personal garden. I don't know, whatever you have. Connect with other farmers. You can join these organizations or just start your own local group. Um, Most importantly, continue learning. Um, there are many and free resources available. We are just getting started and hope to see you again in the future, of course. And also, the internet is your friend in that matter, especially now with all of these new tools with AI, with education platforms. There's a lot that you can do. Just the other day, I discovered a tool, a permaculture design tool, where you can tell the computer about your land, what you have, what you don't have, and it will create a plan for you. And there's a lot of resources like that. Just remember, it's not about immediate perfection, it is about steady progress, because every small step that you take is a step towards a healthier soil, towards healthier food, and healthier communities. I feel like I said that a lot today, but I am passionate about it. When I began this journey back then, I felt like I was going against the norm, especially in the big city and in my classes. But as I learned more and connected more with others, especially while traveling, I realized that we are all part of something larger. It is like a movement that is reimagining agriculture, and it is good to see that it is happening everywhere. And we're kind of continuing a story that has been unfolding for thousands of years, and it is the story of humans and the land and the way we transformed it, and the way we transformed it to where it is today. We can also transform it back or further or wherever we want. You have the opportunity to do so, to write the next chapter of that story, for yourself, your family, your nation, or just for wherever you want. With every seed that you plant and every decision you make on your farm, you're kind of shaping this future. This is where I end the presentation for now. I thank you for your time, for the important work that you do, and for being part of this journey towards a more sustainable world, which is also what we're trying to do here. Um, I did have a lot of fun doing this. It has been the first time. Um, so thanks for bearing with me. I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts now. What kind of resonated with you today and what questions you have, so we can continue this conversation for a moment, and I would see what you have to say. I just see your message right now, Ranjita Mary. I don't know when you asked, at what part you asked that question. Mm-hmm. So for the earthworm count, um, I'm not exactly sure if there's like, I'm probably there is like some tables that will show you, okay, for 1 cubic meter of earth you should have this or that many worms. But for you to start, um, if you need that, you can for sure look that up. I don't have a number for you right now, but if you just dig in your soil and you found worms at all, this is already a good sign, at least in my experience. In many places that I have been to, there have been little to no worms at all. But if you have just a small area and you dig into it and you immediately find worms, and more and longer ones of them, if they are big and look healthy, this is already a really good sign, and you don't have to exactly count them. And if it's 20, it's better than if it's 10 or something like that. But please, if you have more questions or want to go more into it, I can try and provide more resources. And also, I'm thinking to start a home garden in my house to grow veggies and you would like to know how to start that. I think that's a fantastic idea for sure. That's how it started for me back then because I didn't have any land or any garden to do so. But like I mentioned, I liked cooking and I liked food, and this is also what I said about every little step. So um, the idea is really good. I don't know your house if you have really a plot of land or maybe just a balcony, or if you want to do it like on your window bank. You would have to decide if you can do an actual bed that you fill up with earth or if you grow it in little pots. That's how I started. I just Okay, you have a balcony. That's how it started for me. On my balcony, I just started to grow some herbs so that I would always have some fresh thyme or rosemary or basil for the kitchen, which is already great. If you go in the store, you always buy it um, in plastic bags. You don't know where or how it's been grown, so just going there, cutting it off, having some fresh herbs was already really nice. In general, herbal gardening is really great. If you have a little bit more space to put some bigger pots, I also don't know your climate, but you can also start with some tomatoes. You can look around for some local shops that already sell little seedlings, so you don't have to do everything from the seed up, um, but buy a variety of plants. It's not exactly rocket science. There's a lot of stuff you can just put into a bucket. Of course, you have to remember it. It shouldn't be outside when there's super heavy rains and it gets washed away. But you cannot either forget to water it. You can just look what you really want to have for yourself. So it's a great start. Also, some other thing that I looked into it, it depends a little bit on your resources, is there's low budget possibilities to do it. Um, is everything around hydroculture. If you when where you grow your plants not in soil, which I spent a lot of time talking about today, but in water. So there's some methods. One's called the Kratky method, um, where you also have buckets and the plant is just growing its roots into the water. You have some nutrients in the water and you just fill that up. There's a lot of different systems and approaches to that, but it can also be a good way to do it when you have very limited space or sunlight. Maybe at some point you need to buy some lands if you grow more indoor or there's not a lot of light. But maybe you have more specific questions. I got a bit ahead of myself. Ranjita, if you have more questions, please. You also said the thing about the community garden earlier, and that is a good point. I didn't mention that word, but it is essentially just what I was talking about the whole time because you don't want to only do it for yourselves. Um, a community garden should be a place where everyone can go to. They can learn from people who already have more experience and more knowledge. They can try and apply that knowledge, for example, on their home balcony. Um, and it is also a place where there should be some workshops where you can find shade when it's really hot in the summer out and outside, and just a place to overall connect and work on a combined community and future. Thank you for the feedback. I will see if there's some more questions coming in, and if not, this will be it for the first webinar from Agrocrat. Be sure to check out what they will do in the future. I'm sure they will come up with some really helpful lessons. How to choose the domain in organic farming, because there were a lot. Imagine I'm having a few acres of land with good water facilities, and we're currently cultivating, but not in organic matter. Well, I believe it is not really different domains. Sure, you may at some point have to decide which are the main crops that you want to focus on, or what is the main market. Do you want to stay local and just sell to the people around you and also make it affordable for them, but also you need to survive? Or do you plan to go bigger and export to other countries? Um, but especially when you have water available. Um, Also, if not, it is possible to do it if there's not much water, of course, but it will make things a lot easier. And there is, that's why I said in the beginning, it is a little bit broad, and that's why I'm sure one of the next webinars will go more into detail into really the very specific steps that you can take. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that specific, because there is these things like composting or mulching that I said, and you can start with these really quickly. You can set up a compost tomorrow if you want on your land, and you just put in there whatever you have for now. You apply these common strategies. I would always suggest start, if you don't know where to start with compost, because the more compost you have from everything that you have on your land, and when you collect your waste from the kitchen, from cooking, from your animals, just from trees and leaves and whatever you can find. And you put it in a compost. It doesn't have to be perfect. Of course, with time, you should learn a little bit. It has to stay moist. It has to have the right um, amount of greens and browns, for example. There's some mixtures that you should be aware of. But if you just start composting and put more organic matter back onto the ground instead of always trying to put something else in, that will get you a long way. Like mulching needs to be in the land for a few weeks, 2 months, right? Yeah, mulching is not something that you do only for a couple days or something. Of course, especially when there's little to no rain and it is really hot and the everything evaporates and the earth becomes very dry. That is the most important time to do mulching. You can use a lot of different things which is available to you, which are available to you. Sometimes to have more like um, dried grass or maybe only leaves. Best is like wood chips, but probably also most expensive or hard to get. But if you leave these on the ground for a longer time, yes, then what it also breaks down. It also brings this organic matter into the ground, and it really protects the soil from evaporating. So best thing is if it stays on for a longer time, and as it breaks down, you also need to eventually top it up again. But you don't have to do it everywhere. Like you're not going to mulch huge fields where you only grow wheat or rice. That is not what you do. You do it more in your vegetable garden and little garden beds, and um, yeah, the bigger it gets, of course, but not where you only have like one crop on a field. So just organic pest repellent. Um, this is also a very interesting topic that it would be possible to talk a long time about. It is not my specialty. The best thing I know about is this permaculture and agroforestry approach, where you really try and use as many insects and birds, and a way to complement the plants, because some plants they help each other right from the beginning. What is a good example? Um, Also for you guys, sometimes struggle with the names of these plants in English. They either through their roots or also through their flowers, they sometimes give off substances that repel other insects, like especially with these herbs. Also, I believe mint or um, mint is, I think, a good example. This is one way to do it. Other ways is that you can create these teas or cocktails. I believe one that you use in India is where you use the urine of cows and you mix it with something. um, there's also other plants that you can soak in water. You grow them and then you cut them, you put them in the water and soak them, and this will create some sprays. And you can spray these repellents on the plants, but it is important to notice that oftentimes you have to do that every couple of days, like every 3 4 days, maybe once a week, also depending how often it rains. But um, if you look a little bit into it and maybe just look it up, I'm sorry that I cannot provide detailed information right now, but if you look up organic pest control, maybe specific to your area in India, also if you talk to people in your area who are already doing that, I'm sure you can figure out what is best suited for you, if it's one of these mixes or maybe implementing other plants and species that will attract something, some other animals that will feed on these. Like there's some beetles who feed on larvae, for example. Okay. Any more questions? Any more details needed? I am for sure happy that there has been some questions at all and that some of you sticked to the end. Um, I do hope that you learned something new and come back for next webinar with us. I believe this is it for today. Thank you, John, for your feedback and for inviting me. And I wish all of you a good evening and a good new week. I'm glad to hear that, Ranjita. Nice to meet you, and bye bye until the next time. Ciao, ciao.